This upgrade for Adagio Payables 9.3C has many new features, including supporting project tracking defined in Adagio Ledger, electronic filing of American 1099 forms, and EFT improvements. Simple project tracking of amounts posted to Ledger accounts is now available for vendor invoices and cash invoices. When entering either of these transactions, and a distribution account is selected that allows project codes, the project field is enabled for selection. Project verification rules for requiring a value and the value being in a restricted range are both adhered to in Payables, and errors will appear if an invalid project value is entered. If distribution codes or distribution set details are meant to be related to a specific project, you can set a default project value on the code to be used for the transaction when selected, which can be changed if desired. The same verification rules apply when setting a default value on distribution codes and sets, where a Ledger account is also specified. If vendors are meant to be assigned a specific project, you can select a default value on the Accounting tab. This project will be used for all new invoice distributions, unless there is a different project assigned to the selected distribution code. The batch listing report will print the project code and description with invoice distribution details, as will the posting journal. Posting invoices and cash invoices will maintain the project values for the transactions that will be retrieved into Adagio Ledger. And if you use the Consolidate GL Transactions function, this will ignore records with project code values and leave all these detail values intact. For companies that are required to submit 1099 miscellaneous and 1099 NEC tax forms to the IRS, previously this had to be done by printed form only. Now a new electronic filing method in conjunction with 1099 Express is available. To enable this integration, open the company profile and ensure that the company address has the Format option enabled to standardize the layout. And on the System Options tab, that 1099 form processing is enabled. Then, on the 1099 Options tab, you can reveal the 1099 Express integration features. 1099 form types that are assigned to vendors have been expanded to assist in electronic filing. Each record has two settings. One to specify that the form type will be for either the 1099 NEC or 1099 miscellaneous form, and the other to set the box number for 1099 miscellaneous forms. Supported box numbers are 1 through 6 and 10. When generating 1099 files, vendors that are configured to support 1099 forms will be selected based on the assigned form type and its associated 1099 type. For flexibility of timing for submitting 1099s, now the last year 1099 amount is maintained for each vendor, in addition to current and next year. When 1099 Express is enabled, vendors with 1099 enabled are required to use formatted addresses for standardized layout and a vendor ID value. If either of these situations are false, an error will occur when saving the vendor. When you are ready to submit the 1099 amounts, from the Maintenance menu, select 1099 Express Forms. Choose either the NEC or miscellaneous type, which will automatically select all associated form types and the vendors that use these types. Choose the year that you are submitting, which uses the associated amount year on vendors. And if you wish to further restrict which vendors are selected, there are other ranges available. The file name and location is displayed at the bottom, and the name is based on the selected type and year. Click the Export button to create the file. You will be warned if the file already exists. If any errors exist with company or vendor setup, it will be displayed here, and a prompt will allow you to delete the partially generated file. Corrections should be made before continuing. When file generation is successful, and the 1099 Express program is installed on your workstation, it will offer to start the 1099 Express program for you with the generated vendor file and amounts loaded. If you need to make electronic fund transfer payments in US dollars, there are now 2 new EFT processor formats to accommodate ACH layouts, and another that is used with US dollars. Each EFT provider format has settings for identifying currency options, whether the vendor is American or cross-border. If you use both TelPay and bank EFT electronic payments in the same company, vendors using EFT required non-blank bank ID values, which were not always known. Now vendors can have a TelPay only setting, identifying that other EFT formats will not be available for this vendor. It also allows leaving the bank ID blank, since the TelPay interface does not require them. And the bank ID format can be entered on the Accounting tab without dashes, and will be inserted when a TelPay payment is made for the vendor. When system check runs are created for a bank connected to a bank EFT rather than TelPay, only vendors without TelPay only are selected. System check runs have new improvements to make payments easier to manage. When EFT processing is enabled, it is now possible to select only vendors that do not use EFT. Therefore, there is no potential overlap when creating one run to do electronic payments for some vendors, and printed checks for the other block of vendors that do not accept EFT. And when EFT processing is selected, the provider assigned to the bank is displayed for reference. When vendors have a net negative balance, or the total balance is outside of the vendor payment range, a payment will not be issued as before. The total check run amount from the pre-check register is displayed as the net issued amount here, as before. But it wasn't on the Payments tab, and in these cases differ from the total payment run amount. Now on the Payments tab, the same net issued amount is displayed to compare to the other totals. And the individual net issued amounts by vendor is now available to include as a column in the vendor summary grid at the top. These net issued values will match up to the EFT totals, as well as printed checks. For companies that require many default optional text field values to select from, it is now possible to import directly to that list. From the File menu and Optional Fields, edit the optional field that you want to update. Next to the Default Value List grid is a new Import button. From here, you can locate the Excel file that contains the list of values to import in a single column with no header row. If you want the Excel file to be deleted after a successful import, this option will allow this. Continuing from here, we'll import that list as new values for this optional field. Only text up to the field maximum length will appear, and characters will be forced to uppercase if this setting is enabled. In case a group of values were imported by mistake and need to be removed, multi-select is available on this grid to delete all selected values at once. The new grid search introduced in Adagio Ledger 9.3b is now available in Payables. On almost every grid, use the Ctrl F keys to open the grid search function. use the Control arrow keys to position the search to the desired column, or use the mouse to click the arrow buttons, where the mouse will remain on the button. Then enter the desired search criteria, remembered from the previous search by user. If any matches are determined, then you can load those matches into the grid. The grid could be further restricted with another search within this search, or reset using the Ctrl-Z shortcut. For companies that regularly use control payments to mark invoices with forced or held status, it is now even easier. Invoice batch entry and importing now supports setting the payment control status, so you don't have to wait until invoices are posted to set this. Only users with security access to payment control will be able to see and set this status. Invoice batch entry descriptions can now be populated with default values, based on settings for each vendor. The company profile has default values used for creating new vendors, or for miscellaneous cash invoices with no vendor code. Default descriptions can be either standard text, or use code such as for date, time, or user to be translated for when and who did this entry. The tax tracking report has more options to give you more control over what is printed. The previous single report date has been replaced with a date range, so you can now set the start date for transactions. New predefined date ranges for last month and current month are available for ease of use, and also for remembering a range setting that can be used with favorites and report sets. And for printing only the transactions that have tax amounts, another option to suppress zero records can be used. Read the complete list of features and changes from the release notes. Watch another video on this Adagio program from the playlist, or subscribe to the Adagio YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.